have Keira Solon, who is a faculty member in the Harmon College of Business and Professional Studies at the University of Central Missouri, where she teaches courses related to business communication, events management, and leadership. She is also the faculty advisor for the Events Marketing and Management program. Currently, she is a doctoral candidate at the University of Missouri pursuing her EDD in educational leadership. She has earned a Master's of Arts degree in Technical and Professional Writing from Oklahoma State University and a Bachelor of Arts degree in English from Kansas State University. In addition, she holds a National Etiquette Training Certification from the Etiquette Institute in St. Louis, Missouri. Having worked in higher education for nearly 2 decades, Ms. Solon began her career by serving as an academic advisor and then career development coordinator before transitioning to a full-time faculty role. Keira, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
And we also have your partner in crime with us today, and that is Dr. Craig McGill, a returning guest to the podcast. Last time we spoke with Craig was last year, and at that time was working at University of South Dakota. Now, Craig is an assistant professor at Kansas State University and has a new book out with Dr. Jennifer Jocelyn titled Advising Lesbian, Gay, Bisexual, Transgender, and Queer College Students. Craig, welcome back.
Thank you, sir. Happy to be here.
Yes, and happy to have you both on. So, Keira, let's start with you. Usually we ask our guests to kind of give us their background. So what's been your path into higher education and academic advising?
Well, I've actually been thinking about this. As I've mentioned, I've been listening to the podcast, and I know you asked this question, and I feel like such an imposter. So I'm trying to think of how to frame this in a way that's most relatable. As you said in my bio, I got my master's degree in technical and professional communication. I had no intentions of ever being in any sort of education. I come from a family of educators, and I guess I knew better. But when I was in graduate school, I started teaching as a part of a teaching assistantship, and then I started training. So I was training at the Technology Center doing industry soft skill trainings, and I liked that, but I didn't really have a plan for how to move into my career. And so it was really one of those happenstance things. There was a job for an academic advisor open at the institution that I had graduated from, that I was lecturing at. I had done a lot of study abroad when I was an undergraduate, and this was a study abroad specific position. I thought, well, I'll apply for this because it sounds like benefits and, a full-time gig and everything. And so I applied, and I didn't get the job, but they did interview me. And then they called me back to interview for a lower list. This was a senior advising position, an advisor 1 position. And I didn't get that job. There were 2 positions open, and they offered it to 2 other people, one of whom declined. And so then they called me and offered me the job. And so I did that for a year. I worked specifically with we call them at my institution now an open options population, but an undecided population. And I was only in academic advising for a year. I loved it. I thought that it was really, really fun. I felt like I was getting pretty good at it, but it didn't pay really anything at the institution I was at. And having had a recent master's degree, and I didn't have I wasn't married, I didn't have a double income or anything like that. I was actually offered a position in the career services office next door that paid just enough more, not a ton, but just enough more that I didn't have to be lecturing also 12 hours and, trying to make my finances work. So at that point, I moved into career services. I stayed in career services for about a decade, 3 years at that institution. And then I came to my current institution, the University of Central Missouri. At the University of Central Missouri, I had a lot of professional opportunity to work with a lot of different departments, design and develop programs, design and develop courses, both career-related courses, then also departmental courses, specifically for the English department and their new technical writing program. And I was still adjuncting in the business college teaching business communication. And when a full-time position came open that way, they asked me to apply. And so I did. And then they didn't hire me. I stuck around. They hired my wonderful colleague, Dr. Halsworth. And then another business communication instructional position came open about 2 years later, and I didn't even see it. I was happy enough in career services. I had just met my husband. My life was going and, just kind of on autopilot. And they reached out to me to say, aren't you going to apply for this? We almost hired you last time. I was like, oh, I guess I will. And so I applied for that position, and I was really sad to leave career services. I cried a lot. It felt very like this existential crisis, but I'd always loved being in the classroom, and it was a 9-month contract. The pay was different. There were lots of reasons to go that direction. And I was very, very happy there. About 2 years into that faculty role, we started a new program in I work in the management department, and we started a new program in the College of Business, which is an events marketing and management program. And I had quite a bit of events management experience from having served in career services, career fairs, interview days, all of that type of stuff. And so they put me in charge of creating some courses, and I eventually became the unofficial program coordinator. It's a long story. I will be the program coordinator at some point very soon. And then the faculty mentor, faculty advisor for all of those students. And so 15 years later, here I was back advising students in a way that I hadn't done since the very beginning of my career. And it's been really awesome. It's been kind of that missing piece that brings all of the things that I love to do together.
Yeah. And I think talking about like the story in terms of like you are applying and let's say you didn't get the job and then you're like, yeah, I'm not going to apply for it, or you didn't see the job posting and then they reach out to you. It just shows like you can have an impact on someone and not realize it. Yeah. And then the fact that they're like, hey, you should put your app in.
Yeah.
Okay, I think I'll do that.
And I remember being disappointed, obviously, when I didn't get it the first time. Not surprised, because the person, my colleague, who's wonderful that they did hire, had been with the department in a different role, But I remember thinking, well, that didn't work out. Guess I wasn't meant to be a faculty member, right? That's fine. I like what I'm doing. And then, I continued to adjunct for them. And they were like, what, are you crazy? We need you. We thought you were coming on board with this, but I wasn't even paying enough attention to know.
And that's what I like about these stories is, that everyone kind of has their different path, and the fact that, I haven't heard this one before. So yeah, this one's really great to hear. And Craig, so last time we spoke with you, you were at USD. So where's your career taking you? Where's your life taking you over this last year since we last met?
I have two important updates. The first is the most important. Since I was last on this podcast, I have started to listen to podcasts more. And so it's a lot more fun being on a podcast when you kind of know what a podcast is about and what it's like. So that's the major update. The minor update is that I moved a few states away and got my dream job. So I'm an assistant professor for the Academic Advising Certificate, Master's, and PhD program at Kansas State University. I joke, of course, but this really has been just incredible. I feel so blessed and fortunate, especially when I work with our students here. So it's a little bit meta in that I'm advising grad school or grad students for academic advising. So that's lots of fun. And, my first year here was a little surreal, like it is, for everyone. But I was basically kind of in my lane in my home office all year. So it's been a lot of fun, coming to campus. And, of course, the only reason I have my mask off is because I'm in my private office. Everywhere I go outside of here, I have to have my mask on, of course. This will be so fun to watch in 20 years, and we'll be like, what the hell are we talking about with masks? Yeah, it's been just a lot of fun. I've gotten to teach research courses as well as courses in academic advising, which, what could be better? It's been a blast.
I know. And then you're mentioning it's your dream job. And then even there was a K-State article where you're quoted as saying, I'm still speechless that this is my dream job. And it came true.
Every single day, still a year and a half later.
What is it about K-State that this is the place that you want to be?
Well, this is the home place of NACADA, and NACADA has been it's really difficult for me to put into words what NACADA has done for me and the friendships that I've made. Many of my best friends in the world are people in NACADA. And so to kind of be at the place where the room where it happens, so to speak, is just amazing. And then of course there's the discussions about academic advising. And of course, you weren't going to get me on here and not have me say a word about professionalizing the field of academic advising and to have a role in that. I mean, we all have roles in that, but to have a role in the curricula for people who are doing our certificate, our master's program or PhD program because they are passionate about this work. And Matt, I think you said that this is going to air sometime mid-November. So those of you who are still thinking about a PhD in academic advising, I'm doing a little recruitment. You have like 2 weeks now by the time this will have aired. December 1st is our deadline for cohort 2. So.
Well, you heard it here. Get that application in. And
That's
Keira,
right.
You earned your BA in English from K-State.
We both have BAs in English.
Yes. What was it about K-State that drew you to wanting to do your bachelor's degree there?
I grew up in Kansas. I'm from Kansas, out in western Kansas, actually closer to Colorado than to Kansas City. And my parents went to K-State. My older brother, all of my siblings actually went there. We were one of those families, we have like the stone in the yard with the Power Cat head and everybody's name on it. So I really grew up as a member of a K-State family. I actually thought about not going to K-State. Weirdly enough, like that was completely taboo in my family, but my grandparents were Oklahoma State alumni, which is where I ended up for my master's degree. And I'm going to go to Oklahoma State just to be different. And then I went abroad for a year between high school and college and wanted to get back home. My older brother was at K-State and I just wanted to, that year abroad was amazing, but I wanted to get back to what felt familiar. And K-State was always kind of home away from home.
There's no place like home. There's no place like home.
No place like home.
Yeah,
that's different for us Kansans.
Yeah, well, that's from one of Craig's favorite movies.
Yeah, it's not. But fun fact, Keira, 10 miles, maybe 15 miles away from here, there is the Wizard of Oz Museum. And I've actually been there. And as a not super fan of the film, it was really enjoyable. So for those who come into Manhattan for NACADA visits or whatever, you got to go. It's a great experience.
I want to go. That's one of my favorite movies.
I'm sorry.
You can stay with Crag. He has a guest room.
Perfect. Gonna make that happen. So how did you all meet?
I'll let Keira respond to this.
I'll go.
I'm including your email in my faculty evaluation.
I am, as we discussed before the podcast, I'm a doctoral candidate and I'm working on my dissertation, and that's a whole other story. But I'm working on my dissertation. I'm examining the career management of female primary role advisors that have been in a primary role for at least 6 years. And as I was it's a long story. It's a short story. I'll make it short. As I was putting together my literature review, I was having trouble problematizing, first of all. I didn't what's wrong with somebody who wants to stay in a job. Like I couldn't really figure out what it was I was trying to problematize for my study. I just knew that I was very, very interested in academic advising. I was very interested in practitioners of academic advising. I'm very interested in the way that they function in the system and are valued in the system. And so I went to the NACADA Research Institute. I hadn't been a member of NACADA for a very long time. It just wasn't, really didn't speak that clearly to the roles that I had been in. But I joined NACADA. Cecilia Olivares, she was actually in my doctoral cohort, not at the same school as I, but we had kind of connected. And so I joined NACADA. I went to the Research Institute because I was like, oh, I'm going to go see advisors in their natural habitat, right? What do they care about? What are the issues that are prevalent? What's the literature that's out there? And so as I was working on this study, kind of fleshing it out, this was just this last summer, I was talking through it with my faculty member of the Research Institute, who was Sarah Scharf Champlin. Am I saying that right? I just called her Sarah. Anyway, and
Champlin
Scharf. And she said, I'm hearing you say these things, and have you looked into the scholarship of Craig McGill? And so I wrote down Craig, Magill, and I continued to misspell his name for even after we started working together. And so I wrote down his name.
In fact.
Right. And I had, of course, come across his scholarship in reading advising literature, but I hadn't zeroed in on that scholarship. And so then I read everything he wrote. And I'm like, oh, I think this is I think what I'm latching onto is a professionalization issue. I think that's the framing of what it is I'm seeing here. And so I wrote my literature review this summer. I just took my comps this summer, wrote my lit review this summer, just defended my proposal. And it's all just McGill. And so I was like, who is this McGill guy? And I was looking for a very specific set of literature. I was looking for literature about women in advising, and I wasn't finding it. And I'm saying these things in my literature review like it doesn't exist. And I needed to make sure that was true. And so I Googled McGill and saw that he was at K-State. And I was like, oh, well, I'm a K-Stater. He's a K-Stater. K-Staters can contact K-Staters, right? Like that's something that we do. And so I reached out to him and basically said, I'm your biggest fan, right? Like that's really, I was a little calmer in the first email, but I've read your scholarship. I'm working on this. I just want you to know how sincerely appreciative I am that somebody's doing the scholarship. And that was just a note of appreciation to make that connection. And he emailed me back. And I remember getting the email that night, and I called my girlfriends that are in my cohort, and I was like, oh my God, he emailed me. It's like, I was completely fangirling right over this scholar that I admired. And so anyway, we set up a meeting because I did have some questions about my dissertation. And then if you know anything about Craig, it's that he will do research with you. And
didn't I talk you out of mixed methods at that meeting?
We did, because I still was designing my study. I've been through my program very, very fast. Very, very fast. Well, I should be done in April, and that'll be 2 years and 9 months from when I started. And I didn't slow down enough to go through the process, really. I just I needed to get done. And so, I was talking to Craig. I don't know if I should do this. I don't know if I should do that. And so he talked me out of a mixed method study, which is brilliant because I can't math, right? So that was probably the right thing to do. And really helped me with my study design. And I have a wonderful committee, but they're not, they don't know anything about academic advising. And so he's really been kind of my unofficial committee member. He's my subject matter expert. And I didn't know if I could research or not. My program was not a heavily research intensive program. It's a practitioner's program. It's meant to build higher education leaders, not necessarily higher education scholars. And Craig let me try. We had obviously some common areas of overlap and interest. And I realized I loved scholarship. And he was patient enough to kind of help me. He's still helping me on the journey. I mean, we've just gotten started, but now we write together a lot.
One of my favorite performances of all time is Kathy Bates in Misery. And I'm your number one fan. I'm your number one fan. You've been totally Kathy Bates. I'm just kidding.
No, I haven't. I've been a value-added addition to your research stream. But we connected very quickly and clearly have a similar sense of humor and enjoy a lot of the same things, and definitely have a lot of the same scholarly interests, and both drink too much wine. So lot of territory there. Okay, I drink too much wine. I'm sorry, Craig, not you.
Wait, so red wine or white wine?
Red.
Red, 100%. Yeah, I don't associate with people who drink white wine. I'm just kidding.
I drink it on occasion.
You know, another interesting twist in this, my parents have since retired to Manhattan. They didn't live there when I was in school there, but when they retired, that's where they moved. They actually live like less than a mile from Crag.
Isn't that crazy?
So Craig, do you and Keira's parents like meet up for dinner?
We hang out like 3 times a week.
The point is, when I go visit my parents, I also go visit Craig because
it's crazy because we haven't met yet.
Oh, I was thinking like you'd go home to visit your parents and like there's Craig just chatting with them.
That would be so awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, at some point.
We'll work that out. Yeah. That's great. We've only known each other since June. So we're taking it
it's
slow.
crazy.
But yeah,
we feel like we've known each other for like ever. We know each other pretty well at this point, and we know how to give each other a hard time and a shoulder to cry on or whatever.
But it's one of those things where, you're like, hey, Craig, I think we relate. I have questions on advising, on scholarship. So you mentioned any of that, and Craig's usually like, let's meet up. Let's figure this out. How can I help you develop yourself, and can we work on anything together? And you were mentioning that there's various projects that you all are working on. Is there any that you can share?
I was just going to say, there's been more than once where you like were not super thrilled with what I said in terms of feedback, but you had said that later recognized like the value of it.
Yeah, I'm a novice researcher. I really am. I've done some research with my colleagues. I'm always like, second or third, still am with Craig. But, it was like, here, Keira, proofread this and find us some literature. So I wasn't completely brand new to it, but very, very new to scholarship. And I didn't get a lot of critique through my doctoral program because I am a good writer and a good thinker. And the program wasn't designed to create, these outstanding scholars. And so everything I did, not that I didn't get any critique, but it was good enough, right? Like it was good enough. And so to now be working with somebody who I do consider to be a very, very serious scholar, and sometimes it hurts my feelings a little bit, right? Do you guys know the Tech Nine song "Fragile"? It's like
I don't, but
scholarship.
I'm going to go listen to this after this podcast.
You should, because it's like, this is something that all of a sudden I care about, and I want to be good. And I don't just want to be good for myself, but I also want to be good for Craig, because he's given so much of his time and so much of his just personal mentorship to me. I want to write things, and he's like, oh, thank God I didn't have to write that. Right. And then it comes back with like edits.
I hope and the people who know me know this well. I hold my same standards to myself too, and so I'll read something I wrote a month ago and go, oh my God, what the hell am I trying to say here? Like there's there's problems. Go ahead.
Is it a writing relationship blossomed so quickly,
Yes.
It went from like one day he's like confidence building and no, Keira, I think you can do this. Your mind is smart and your ideas are good. And, and then like 3 days later, it's like, that's crap. And I feel like when I'm being not, when I'm being more objective about it, I feel like it's because my skill is really increasing. And so therefore his critique is really increasing, right? Am I right, Craig? Is that what's going on here?
Yeah.
I'm getting better so you can be more critical.
Yeah.
Just like, that's good.
Your work and your thinking is strong enough that I feel like you can handle, I don't even know if I'd call it critique. Well, maybe, but like this is because it's always, except for like a few occasions, it's been the context of our work together. So it's been more like, I think we need to do something here, and I think it needs something, whatever. We also like feed off of each other really well. And one of the really unique things about our friendship and collegial relationship is that we're complete opposites in terms of when we function. And so many people know this about me. I'm not a morning person, and I don't hit my stride until, later in the day.
Bedtime?
It's not uncommon for me to
midnight?
be working past midnight even, till 1, 2 in the morning. And so what would happen, especially in those early days, is that Keira would be working first thing in the morning, like, I don't know, 7, 8, 9 or earlier. Yeah. And then I would read what she did later that night and do my own edits. And then she'd work on it then. And so we had this really like, we're both in the midst of our semesters now. And so it hasn't been quite the same since summer, but just like this really intense productive period this summer. And, she just blew me away in terms of her ability to synthesize literature for, basically we were looking at reviving a paper that's from my dissertation. And she said, I think I know where to go with this in terms of the constructing the literature that needed to be built to frame the research. And she went with it, and just like within, I don't know, like it feels like a few days, it may have been a week, but like you had just done this incredible work. And then of course, that's when I started to kind of tear it apart a little bit and, you know, move pieces of it to the introduction and pieces of it to a separate literature review section. And that's just sort of like the process of writing. And part of this also is if she or anybody thinks I'm a hard ass, they only need to meet my advisor. And I am saying this publicly because I would say this to her face. You know, she is incredible. She made me who I am, but gosh, she's scary. And Keira has had the chance to now meet her. And so she's a co-author on this paper, and she has yet to do her review of it. So I'm just sort of anxious to see what her review of our first collaboration will be.
That would make me super nervous.
Oh, yeah, I'm plenty nervous. Yeah. Craig's like, do I need to remind her to work on it? I'm like, no. Nope. Got my ego in check right now. Let's
so Tanette Rock, if you're listening, get on it.
But I wouldn't say, Craig, that you're tearing it to shreds, let's say. I mean, you were saying, you know, oh, I see this part here towards the end, but maybe this can go in the introduction. So you're kind of seeing that this is all good stuff, but maybe position-wise, it flows better in a different order.
Yeah, or those 2 paragraphs that I said had no business being in there. No, I'm just kidding.
but isn't directionless, I think was the word.
Meanders, right? I think it said.
But as a novice scholar, and then also in our relationship, you know, our writing relationship, not necessarily in our friendship, but, you know, and where there's such a power dynamic, a power differential in play. Like I, especially in the beginning, am so hungry for this approval because I don't know what I'm doing, but I know that whatever it is, I love it. And this is something I want to do. And I'm 41 years old and I've never been trained in the way that Craig is training me, you know? And so I think that because I have so much heart in it and so much hope in it, and then so much gratitude for Craig that, like, you know, in the beginning, especially, even the little things were like, but I'm trying so hard, you know?
Well, and if she has no idea what she's doing, she's the most successful faker on earth because she does not at all read that way.
No.
So it really, you know, it was so fun working with you because you brought the game that I could play, you know. It was not like, you know, I'm a professor, of course, so I teach writing and I teach grad students at various levels, some of whom it really is going down to the very fundamentals. And that's not what my experience with you was at all. So
isn't this nice? We should have.
We can be friendly to each other.
Little love fest.
This is proof positive, and we're gonna have to listen to this later. And
whenever we fight, I'm gonna play this podcast.
Now, do you actually answer each other's or finish each other's sentences now?
Sometimes
we see things pretty differently sometimes too. You know, we have a lot of common, to answer your questions, the projects that we're working on mostly deal in the vein of professionalization and advising. But, you know, when you look at professionalization, there's a lot of different steps to the process. And so, you know, each one of those things is worth examining. It's worth examining the education. It's worth examining the career opportunities. It's worth examining mine focuses a lot on structural reproduction of gender inequities within workplaces. So, you know, there's a lot of different areas of focus, but I would sum it up to say that generally it all deals in the realm of professionalization.
Yeah. And where we differ, it seems to almost always be a healthy, different perspective that really sharpens both of our perspectives. I think it's pretty infrequent that we totally just have to agree to disagree.
Oh, yeah.
I think there is one clear place where that is, and I think we could talk about that here, because honestly, it's a debate in the field, and I think it's a very valuable, legitimate debate. Did I tease enough?
Yeah, I would say go more into it if you want.
Keira, does academic advising belong in academic affairs or student affairs?
I don't know that it matters where it belongs. I think academic advising is a student service. And what's been really, really fascinating, and this is something that Craig and I need to flesh out for future scholarship in my study. My study has a two-part interview protocol. So I'm into the second interviews with people, and they're just amazing. Like, I can't sleep. I'm just rolling all this around in my head all the time. And, so anecdotally, I have not conducted any data analysis, and I don't want to say too much because I want these fascinating studies, to be revealed. But seems to be a really, really strong argument for having academic advising housed within academic units in a decentralized fashion with a reporting structure up through a dean and a provost. If the primary role advisor is the primary relationship and the primary benefactor of the structure. So I see your point. I think that,
which I haven't made yet. What is my point?
The academic advising works very, very well when it's housed within the academic structure. I think to conflate advising with being full-time in the classroom, or even more, to remove advising from the other services that support students through their journey, I can't buy into that. One of the biggest arguments, I guess, that Craig and I've ever gotten into is he said, but people come to the university for the classes. No, they don't. Where'd you go to school? Right? Like that's a big part of the reason why some people go to college. But some people go to college to find community. Some people go to college to find the football games. Some people go to college to have an extension of living their high school dreams.
Why does it have to be like a service for, like, I don't think it has to be the classroom or service. Like, we know that teaching and learning takes place in traditional classrooms, whether they're lecture or different types. There's teaching and learning that takes place in labs. And so there's teaching and learning that can take place in offices.
And I'm not arguing that teaching and learning isn't taking place. I think some of the most important teaching and learning is taking place in advising offices. I mean, that's the entire navigation of the system. But higher education in general is built on this kind of bifurcated system that you're one or the other, right? And I think that it would be easier to embrace being a member of the other and to really build off of that structure than to try to force it into this. I don't know.
Who's forcing it?
I don't know that anybody is forcing it. I think you are, and your scholarship is forcing it, Craig. And
You're wrong.
You need to just let it go. It's not going to happen. I also
to quote
think
one of our former presidents in a presidential debate, wrong.
I also think some of the issues, especially now that I'm so up close and personal with these primary role advisors, I just finished interviews 24 and 25 today, and I started on October 1st. So I've been inundated in these interviews.
He's a real slacker.
I'm slacker, right? So, I think that one of the things that I think that we really, really, as scholars and aspiring scholars, and Craig, leaders in Nakata, I'm not, but Craig is, that we really need to be careful about when we reimagine academic advising and we work towards this professionalization where potentially it's housed in an academic unit and there's a career ladder that mirrors tenure. When we rely too much on the academic paradigm, I don't think we don't want to leave the current practitioners behind. We don't want to leave the accidental advisors behind. We don't want to leave the people who stumbled into the career and now have been doing it for 18 years and are doing this wonderful, wonderful service to students. And I worry about that. That's the forcing it that I'm talking about. I think that there's a lot of value in an advising education. And man, I wish at the point that I was, even in career services advising students, had some of that additional in my background. But I think that advisors writ large are these phenomenal additions to their institution. And I don't think we need to reconstruct to the point that those people don't get to play anymore.
And I think there's value in that and thinking very deeply about that. A couple of the things about professionalization, and some listeners are going to be turned off when I talk about professionalization, but I guess I would implore those listeners to not mistake what I'm saying for professional behavior or being a professional, because that's oftentimes the knee-jerk reaction to this. We're a professional. Why do we keep talking about this? Well, we keep talking about this because we are not valued and recognized for the incredible work that we do to change students' lives. And so until we are there, we need to keep talking and strategizing about how we better, advocate for ourselves. So to me, that's what professionalization is. And so what I was going to say is that one of the difficult things about this is that as occupations professionalize, one of the inevitable things, for better or for worse, is that you have to start to put parameters around the work and start to exclude and include based on what that work is. That's just part for the course of professionalizing. And oftentimes how that comes, I'm not advocating for a required degree or a required certification necessarily, but just as a point of saying that historically, as occupations professionalize, that typically is part of that trajectory. And I've said for years, and I'll just say it here, my fantasy is that faculty or that advisors would be classified as faculty akin to how librarians are oftentimes classified. Although I've learned recently that there's movement to deprofessionalize librarians, and in some places they are staff. But I would love for advisors to have, scholarly informed practice.
And that's where I think this conversation matters, and the difference between academic affairs and student affairs, because I believe that's potentially the wrong anchoring. I think that you can anchor in the faculty side, and then you have your traditional tripod of service, scholarship, and teaching, or however you want to create that. But I think that if we anchor in the faculty side, the evolution of that precludes a lot of who your current and best practitioners are in advising. I think that if you anchor in the student services side and you look at student service professions that do have a career ladder, that do have, none of them get paid that much money, right? But where there are these opportunities for growth. You look at housing, just as an example. I'm not saying we need to do what housing does, but you are a floor director, and then you're a hall director, and then you're a unit director, and you can have a career, right? You can move up. You can get additional recognition, responsibility, budgeting, managing personnel in a way that academic advising isn't really built for. I wonder if the faculty anchoring is the most inclusive of the population that is advisors, or if a student services anchoring would be more inclusive of your practitioners.
Yeah, and a lot of it really just depends on the institution. So like a lot of the California community colleges, a lot of the academic advisors are hired on as faculty, but a lot from this Cal State University system, and I would imagine even the University of California system, we're all hired on as staff, as academic advisors. So, but what would be NACADA's role in this, if any?
Pass.
Or
I
in
think
your opinion.
to entertain the scholarship, right? To take the different ideas and to allow people to be exposed to the different ideas and to sort through the arguments, right? Like I don't know.
Yeah, and it might be something to continue to think about, and because I would imagine they would have some role in it. I mean, being this global community for academic advising. So
What's tricky about NACADA that differs from other professional associations is the 503c status, and it doesn't allow NACADA to lobby politically. And so I do think in some ways NACADA's hands are tied, and there's certain things they can't take a hard position on. And I'm sympathetic to that for as little as I know about the details of that. But yeah, I mean, there are some times when, and I think about putting the parameters around what advising entails and what advising doesn't entail. And whether it's possible or not, it is my wish that NACADA could take a harder stance on that. Something that like the American School Counseling Association did is they have a list of do's and don'ts, and it very clearly demarks what is within the purview of a school counselor and what is not. And I think it's a very helpful guide. And I know that just it's complicated by the fact that advising positions, like you said, Matt, at different institutions, but even beyond that, within institutions, how athletic advising looks as opposed to transfer advising versus, just any model you can name, the role is different. Faculty versus primary role advisor. So it's complicated. And I guess what I want people to hear is that this is a complex field, and it has a depth and a richness that's worth talking about. And if we're talking about issues of moving the field forward, that's professionalization. Professionalization is not, oh, look at us here. We're not a profession. Oh, it's only us. We can't do anything. That's not what it's about. So, and obviously I get really animated when I talk about this, but I hope whether you agree or disagree with me, I hope that's what you'll hear.
yeah, well, I think you can actually take this topic and, NACADA has their NACADA Presents podcast where they actually take topics and go into deep dives, and it's usually like a 5-piece series. So anyone that's listening, or Craig and Keira could also do that podcast.
Yeah, call us.
I think that would be awesome. But with a little bit of time left, I do want to touch upon the fact that both of you have been primary role advisors. You've been faculty advisors. For those that might be a primary role advisor, not really know what a faculty advisor does, or vice versa, can you talk about some of the similarities and differences between the two?
I'll go first since I have the least experience, as a primary role advisor. And at my institution, the faculty advisor role it's a newer role, and really they hand off, in most instances, they hand off to the faculty advisor once a graduation plan is already on file. So the academic advisors do a lot of the hard work. My role as a faculty advisor is more of the connection to industry, helping students find their way career-wise, just being there to support them through that transition and to work and to build, since I am an advisor for a new major, really to build that system out and that network out. I know that I rely very, very, very heavily on the professional advisors that serve my students. And I, even on things like every time I send out job postings to students, I always CC the advisors, because they want to know with a new program, what types of jobs are out there for my students, who's recruiting my students. We meet with them once a year, and they can tell us how messed up our curriculum is. In the College of Business, there's a lot of layers. There's pre-admissions, there's business core, there's the major classes, and so we rely upon them a lot, especially with the new majors. We're trying to build it out and make it accessible to people, but yet still maintain, the integrity of what we're trying to do. So we collaborate a lot with the primary role advisors. I collaborate a ton with the primary role advisors, and I think that's been really important for the success of the degree program. We've grown exponentially. We grew by 30% last year in, COVID year when everything was just being decimated. I think that collaboration between what I'm doing and what they're doing is just really, really important. And I can't imagine we'd be able to find that success without it. And just really supporting each other. They support me. They ask me questions. I ask them questions. There's a ton of communication that goes back and forth. And I think that I would like to think, I'm sure you'd have to ask Kristen and Jennifer, right? But they're equally reliant on this relationship in order to help the students be successful in the major.
So for those of you who don't know me, I was a primary role advisor for almost a decade, for 9 years at two Research One institutions that had very little in common beyond the fact that they were large state universities. So that was sort of my socialization to advising. And when I was at my previous position at FIU, I got to work with a wonderful faculty advisor. And I've said a number of times, if I could have done research and scholarship at the rate and level that I wanted to as an advisor, I never would have left. And that's probably why I'm so influenced by seeing the advisor role as being a faculty role where the teaching occurs in the advising office and the service involves committees and professional service, and the research and scholarship, include presentations and publications and those good things. I don't pretend that every advisor wants those things, but I wish that there was a path for those who do want to do that. Without naming anybody publicly, because I wouldn't want to do that, not only was I not supported to do research and scholarly writing and publication, I was really kind of discouraged. And that was heartbreaking, to me. And I sure hope that that's not the case for others here listening. But it's again ties back to advocating for the role. So I'm very passionate about us reducing caseload sizes so that whether it's formal writing for publication or not, you can do more scholarly advising because you have fewer advisees and are able to spend more time with them. You're able to do some professional development. You're able to read, the NACADA Journal, the NACADA Review, the Mentor, the Journal of Academic Advising, other scholarship that informs your advising, whether it's published in an advising journal or not. The books that are coming out in our field. I mean, there's so much amazing. Our field is just exploding in terms of scholarship. And this scholarship needs to inform our practice. But if we've got caseloads in excess of 500, 800, 1,000, there's no way to do this really. And so that's sort of where I come from in terms of how I think about advising and it being a scholarly activity. So it's going to sound pretty crazy, but I don't see much of a difference between what I did as a primary role advisor and what I do as a faculty advisor. The only difference is that I get credit now for writing for publication. And that's not a small thing. I mean, that's amazing. And I know that not everybody has, in my partnership here, not everybody in this room here today gets credit for that. And I feel very blessed. But I think that we can still advocate for these changes so that at the very least advisors can engage in more scholarly practices to inform their advising.
And I think that it's good that you widen that umbrella. And this is something that, I remind Craig of frequently. not everybody knows how to scholar, right? Like I'm almost done with an entire doctoral program, which was a very, very good and very, very reputable I don't want to, make it seem like my program failed me. And I'm just now learning how to scholar. And I think that, again, when we reimagine scholarly activity and advising, we have to be very careful. I'm an instructional faculty member at my institution, which means I'm not tenure eligible. I still have faculty. It works different. It's just like advising. It works different on I'm fully participating in a way that a lot of people aren't, or a lot of institutions don't allow them to be. But we've just implemented a new instructional faculty promotion thing. And one of the things that I think is really dangerous about that is that there's an emphasis that can be there on scholarship. And most of people in instructional lines don't know how to scholar. Right? They have a master's degree and they may have chosen a thesis option. They may not have chosen a thesis option. And again, I just think that when we anchor everything in higher education on what we expect of our faculty members, that we neglect to recognize that for most people, not Phenom up here in the left-hand corner, at least on my screen, but for most people, that's a pretty significant learning curve that has to be taught in a very, very direct manner. And I am very hesitant to anchor the success of so many professionals on something that they may or may not have been exposed to, they may or may not have interested in, they may or may not have aptitude for. And so I like that idea of expanding the idea of scholarship to consuming scholarship and not just creating scholarship.
Right. Presenting it in Nakata, it doesn't have to be formal, like not even that. Formal is not the right word, but publishing in a peer-reviewed journal, it doesn't have to look that way for everyone.
Yeah, definitely. And I think if anyone has questions, they can definitely reach out to both of you, but then also Dr. Wendy Troxel from Nakata as well.
I was just going to mention her article on scholarly, I forget what it's called, but and I'm not just saying this because she's my colleague, but it's wonderful, and it really models how to conduct scholarly practice without necessarily having to scholar, Yeah,
and she also says too, like and she also says if you want to maybe make that presentation into an article, record that session, and then that literally can be your first draft of an article.
Absolutely.
And I know as we're winding down time, I do have questions for each of you. So Keira, I'm going to start with you. In one of your classes, there's a chapter that covers thank you messages. And
how do you know this?
I just know things, and you believe this is something that can help.
Bates, stalker.
Okay, then to my YouTube channel.
And you believe this is something that can help people get the furthest in their careers. Why is that?
I am of the school of thought that our careers are anchored largely in part by the connections that we make and the relationships that we build. I mean, I think that most people would agree with that. But I think that it needs to be formally taught, just like everything else that we teach people. Gratitude goes a long way. Gratitude goes a long way with being remembered. Gratitude goes a long way with helping to elevate other people around you and creating a nicer culture around you. I just really think it's important to just stop and be thankful. Not only for your own mental health, right, but for your career success. And so, I'm the queen of the thank you note. I love to write heartfelt thank you notes, but even more importantly, I think I love to teach heartfelt thank you notes. And it's an exercise I do every single semester in my classes. And I actually bring the thank you notes, and we brainstorm when we go through the process. It's not just like write a thank you note and leave. And the spirit and the mood in the classroom that day is just, it's lovely. It's just really, really, really lovely. And there's a part of me that just knows, because I actually make them write it out. And I say, choose somebody accessible, choose somebody you're going to see in the next 24 hours, choose. And you can just sort of, for about 48 hours, just sort of feel the campus vibe kind of coming up here, because they're choosing their professors and their roommates. And,
who you're going to see in 48 hours and have never written a thank you note to?
Because I give you lots of verbal thank you notes. Hello, first of all. And I think that if you would check your email, there's definitely some that qualify as thank you notes and text messages.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'll probably devote like an entire whatever in my book report, right, to your awesomeness. But I think that relationships are enormously important, and I think one of the most important parts of building a relationship is remembering just to have gratitude for the people that are helping you get there.
Yeah, no, I love that. And maybe Craig doesn't want a thank you note. Maybe he just wants a monument erected in his honor. I don't know.
Well, hell yeah. Who doesn't?
But Craig, tell us about your new book that you have out with Jennifer Jocelyn.
So I'm messed up by the mirroring. I keep messing this up, but very proud of this, advising LGBTQ college students. This labor of love that, sort of the pieces of which have been marinating for about a decade. And then one day during my postdoc, it just sort of like, oh, I could write a book proposal. And then, I got feedback on that for, several weeks before I submitted it. But I'm really, really proud of it because the authors who have contributed have just, they're just an amazing array, and just covering different aspects of the issues. So there's the first section is like a theoretical foundations. And so there's, student development theory, there's queer theory, there's intersectionality, there's, career, kind of looking at career issues. The second portion talks about campus issues related to these students. The third section is a more specific look at several of the intersections of these students, LGBTQ students of color, international students, student athletes. And then the final section is kind of the practical portion, where there's a chapter on allyhood as well as campus resources. One of the things that Wendy Schindler and I argue in our chapter on allyship is that being a member of the LGBTQ community does not make you an ally. You actually have to work toward being an ally. It is something you do actively, and you don't rest on your laurels, just like any allyship that you do, or any ally work that you do. And so that's something that we kind of unpack there. The book is now available. I'm super proud of these authors. I think I need to single out one, and I hope I don't get too emotional here, but Christy Carlson was just an incredible thinker in our field. She had done just amazing presentations on applying queer theory to academic advising. And for years, I'm not claiming to be the only person, but myself and several other people who were just shaped by her work had been trying to push her to write. And for years, she didn't. And finally, when we were at NACADA at Louisville, she agreed to do it. And she wrote a magnificent chapter. And in December 2020, passed away before the book was released. But it's an incredible work. And I just am so thankful to have known Christy as an academic, as an advisor, as a human, as a scholar. And so if for no other reason, there are many chapters in the book that are wonderful, and I'm proud of all of them, but especially dedicated to her memory.
Absolutely. And it's great to finally see the book out, because I know it's something that anyone that has actually participated in the process of a book, it takes time, just like doing research and doing articles like both of you have done. And if listeners have any questions, they want to reach out to you based off something that was said in this interview, what's the best way for them to contact you?
Email is first initial C, last name McGill at KSU, Kansas State University.edu.
And Keira, if anyone wants to get in touch with you or trade Craig stories, how can they contact you?
Mine is also K, my first initial, Solon, SOLON, at ucmo.edu.
Awesome. This was a fun conversation. I loved it. And I think we need to have a part 2. And I'm just going to let you both just talk to each other. And I think that will be a fun episode as well. So thank you both for being on.
Can I make just one last point that I was going to make earlier? Hopefully,
no.
what Keira and I have demonstrated is, its advisors were nice and polite because we're the loveliest people on earth, right? But what we would like, at least I would like for this to illustrate, is that we can disagree and we can have just rich discussions. And this is something we talk about with, the upcoming Lowenstein issue of the NACADA review. I had 5 PhD students collaborate with me on an article that's taking on some of his ideas. And, Mark Lowenstein is like way up here, but he would be the first to agree that we have to engage in discourse. So disagreeing is okay. Kumbaya, my lord.
Well, connected to that, before we end this, that ties into a community agreement that Anthea Yugawa from UC Berkeley created for NACADA Region 9. And one of them is respect. And it says, be critical of the idea, the process, and the work, and not the person. Because discussions are happening all the time. And be critical of the idea, that's where discussions come from and how things can move forward. And so don't take it personally. But thank you both again for being on. Look forward to having you on for a future podcast episode.
Thank you so much.
This was fun. Thank you.